Wars, nothing but Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Come talk to us. Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Come talk to us. Us. That's what it is. Come sit. Please come talk to us. Come talk to us. Please come and talk to us about Star Wars. This is a cool.
Please come talk to us. Please, just come talk to us.
Just make our night. Just come talk to us. Hello, everybody. I'm Trey Wynn. I don't even think anyone's in here yet, but we're still recording for those that will listen on our podcast feed. So welcome in. Very first episode of Rebel Base 10. I'm Trey Wynn. Mike Flores here. And folks, I am legitimately ecstatic to be here. Ecstatic or ecstatic? Ecstatic.
Ecstatic.
So I'm ecstatic to be here because Mike and I, through some means of fate, of the Force pushing us in the same direction, luckily both on the light side for now, have crossed paths and
or
found
not.
that we're maybe we'll see. We'll see what happens. But as I say this, I'm going to share the show, so in case anyone's jumping in here, do us a favor, comment with your friends. I'm showing we have a couple comments in here. Michael Scholes coming on YouTube. Hello, good evening, welcome. May the Force be with you, and greetings to everybody here. I'm going to find a couple friends to share this with here too, Mike. But all that to say, Mike and I have had our paths cross, and we are here to break down going forward, to be determined. That's up for our audience and for us to discuss. Obviously, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, a lot of shows and series and other productions, games. I mean, there's a ton of Star Wars content coming out on the horizon. It's a good time to be a Star Wars fan. Obviously, this week was and we can discuss it as we're going to break down Chapter 16. Yeah. Mike, how are you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing great, man. I 100% agree with you. It's great to be a Star Wars fan right now, which I will say was maybe when The Last Jedi came out, it was a little sketchy after all that to be a Star Wars fan. But I think the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight kind of brings it all back. So,
That's
excited to be here. Thanks.
Dude, Mike, I'm honored to be here with you, man, because I know we're coming from different perspectives. I mean, not even just age gap, but just different perspectives in life. And that's one thing I love. I'm at the point now that I have my my oldest daughter old enough to watch these shows, and it's a little violent at times. So we're, kind of treading that line, but she's loving the entire story. And now, obviously, that we can jump into Chapter 16, The Rescue, the return of the Jedi Master that we know and love from the 1980 version of Luke Skywalker. He's back, and it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to jump into it. And I was telling my wife, it hits home for a lot of people. But Mike, I wanted to ask you, man, what was it like for you to see Luke Skywalker in the depiction of Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni? Because it was beautiful.
So yeah, I mean, the as soon as I saw the X-wing fly in, I was like, wait a second, got the chills. And I was just like, and I started thinking through it. I'm like, oh, we've seen some X-wings because the New Republic is, on guard now. So who is this going to be? But then as, everything unfolds, and then as soon as you see the lightsaber, you're just like, unbelievable. Yeah. And I think for me, it's, I think this was the answer, or at least the thing that, it's my opinion that this is the thing that all Star Wars fans wanted to see immediately after watching the original trilogy. I want to know what happens to Luke, and we finally get to see this new version, and it's fantastic. And a couple people I know who have YouTube channels definitely got emotional. I'm not going to lie, I got emotional about it because it was, a childhood hero, and like, oh man, yeah, it's incredible. So it was really, really good to watch. And I think, and I know a lot of people are calling it fan service, but that's the kind of fan service that is going to pay off, because you're honoring characters that people love. So
See, and I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say it's actually fan service because it makes sense in the timelines.
right,
Obviously, the one thing I've heard, and this is from a guy that I love watching, but saying the black outfit that we saw in Return of the Jedi, which was through A New Hope to Empire, going from white to gray to black, and saying, "Ooh, is he going to turn?"
right,
But obviously, he's wearing the exact same outfit, probably the same glove, didn't even change underwear. It looks like so. That's like the one thing I've heard people say, which is like a little nitpicky.
yeah,
But all that to say, no, I mean it was, and that was something I had a legitimate like, I
yeah,
had to like stop, man, and just be
right,
like, what? And I asked myself, what was it and why? And like you said, I mean, there are so many people that I knew growing up from all different walks of life that just connected with Luke Skywalker. And for me, it was one of those things that his relationship with his dad and and that's a very personal topic, but obviously him making good choices, and you don't
mhm,
have to be what other people say, well, that's so and so's son. Well, that's Anakin Skywalker's son. No, that I'm
right,
a Jedi like my father. To see, I mean, even through the whole process of watching the movies and connecting with Luke and then him seeing his father redeemed, it's just like, I mean, that's just a thing. He's coming fresh off of that pyre where his
right,
father was being burned as as a Jedi, and it's like
right,
that's just years ago. So all that
right,
to say, like, it's through all of the, and like we talked about, it was interesting to think through. Like when I was in middle school watching the prequels, it was my generation's version, and the height of the summer release, blockbuster. Like you're waiting in line, you have tickets weeks and months in advance, and it's just like it's an old school thing. It's not what like it is now.
right,
You can buy the night of the trailer release or whatnot, but you never got, even if you liked the episode one, it was like,
yeah,
oh, other people, the OGs did not like it, so now it's no
yeah,
longer. I'm being long winded. I'm sorry, but it's
no,
finally good to have that, the treatment of the characters, even Filoni
yeah,
bringing in Ahsoka, like we're going to talk about in a little while. But just let's go through the episode itself, Mike. I know we
okay,
can discuss the reaction to that. Obviously, opening the scene with obviously Boba Fett in hot pursuit of the Lambda ship with the cloning engineer. His name is escaping me, but obviously the immediate reaction
Dr.
of
Pershing,
Dr. Pershing, thank you, sir.
yeah,
Um, Even the reaction of the pilot to Dr. Pershing of, "Shut your mouth. This is not your laboratory." It's one of
right,
those lines that opens up and kind of grabs you by the shoulders and says, "Let's go, buckle up."
yeah,
Because it's and what it reminded me of was a lot of the pilots and the Empire, personnel that we would see as these rude, like kind of rough and
yeah,
haggard people, and he fit
that's
right into
right,
that. Baloney. Thank you. But
yeah.
what was your thought on the opening? And we can take it a little bit beyond that if you'd like to as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking that this is a testament to how well Filoni and Favreau wrote this. I mean, I think the takeaway from that opening scene is the mention of Alderaan and Cara Dune and her watching her act and react to this guy who was on the Death Star. Oh, the
Mhm.
quip that she made that was like, which one? So good, like so good. I mean, this is good writing. This is good dialogue, and yeah, I mean, just that they started the episode off with a bang, and it was great.
I
So
loved it, and I think even going into, it was funny watching the slave one come over. Which I forget which planet they actually ended up going on to go to the bar with Bo-Katan.
yeah,
Um, but just seeing that thing pulling like a sexy like red Corvette, and it's just that purr of that engine. And
yeah,
even whenever they're going into the light cruiser at Moff Gideon's, just the roar of that thing, and it's one of those things, man. I put a poll up today. I got to check it on our Rebel 10 Rebel Base 10 Twitter. But just asking who is a cooler character, which we can get into maybe in our
right,
now discussion. Um, but just hearing the roar of that thing, and then obviously leading into the bar scene. Um, Something I've noticed, and you tell me what you think about this, Mike. The progression of Din Djarin going from basically Death Watch Mandalorian style to now being exposed to Bo-Katan, taking helmets off, his gesture of doing it, and even in this episode, like that was
right,
one of those scenes. My wife, who's not a like traditionalist Star Wars fan, was sitting there like, oh, when Din took off his helmet, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's just those scenes where it's like this guy's making legitimate change, and
Uh-huh.
even from the conversation between them and Boba Fett of saying, um, you were just a clone, and don't you mean your donor? Talking about Jango Fett, and it's just the disregard of him. But all that to say, later on in the episode, you hear Boba Fett say, "Hey, be careful out there." Talking to Bo-Katan as they're about to go into this light cruiser. What stuck out to you in that scene? And was it something as far as are they pushing this not even a progressive agenda per se, but just these undertones and these storytelling, like the meat to the bone kind of thing, where just change and even the Jedi and a Mandalorian protecting a Jedi now. It's like there's a
Right.
huge progression there in just the history and the lore of Star Wars. But what stuck out to you in those scenes there?
So if I can like go back to like a personal story real quick. The so when I was a kid, I think everybody that's a Star Wars fan remembers like the Boba Fett toy. And anytime like a friend of mine had that Boba Fett toy, we would always talk about the line that Obi-Wan says about the Clone Wars. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, you're watching the original trilogy, you don't know what the Clone Wars is. You see this really awesome character, Boba Fett, and the first trilogy, we really don't get that much more information. But then in the prequels, we learn that Boba Fett's a clone, and then we learn that he's a clone of the Mandalorian. And then they're just unpacking as they produce more content. And I just think that they're definitely heading in that direction with the series of opening up. I mean, if anybody out there watched Star Wars Rebels, they opened up big time again in that, and obviously in the Clone Wars series, they went into Mandalore and Death Watch and a lot of those characters, and I just think it's a really interesting side of Star Wars that, I mean, like for me, it was always like, oh, I want to know more about the Jedi. But now it's like there's so much story to be told with Mandalore, and even the things that that Bo-Katan is after, and the ideology that she like was able to convey to Jin, and so yeah, there's a lot that they're going to unpack, and I have a feeling that's where this show is headed next.
Yeah.
Minus Grogu, I think it's going to be going more towards, I think, that reclaiming Mandalore and opening up that part of the mythology a little bit better, or
Yeah.
more. Sorry, not just better, but it's only going to get better, really.
Right. And my thing is, I know, other reactions I've seen from, friends to, YouTube and podcasts, the whole nine yards. It's one of those things to me where it's obviously Grogu has been not center stage, but I mean, yes, he has been a very attractive, part of the storyline, which I've loved. It's drawn in the new generation of young kids to go through the experience and live it for themselves, and now, like we mentioned with Luke coming back through, um, for him to be able to be the introduction and watching, and we can get to it in detail later in the scene of him with R2D2 and Grogu
Oh
at the feet of Luke.
yeah,
It's like the new generation of Star Wars looking up at the old, and it's like here's the best of what we have to offer, and it's
this
just like,
this
oh,
yeah,
and
this
it was just
might be.
go
No,
ahead.
go
I'm sorry.
ahead, man.
No.
I think that like I can't help but contrast, you know, how awesome and amazing this what like 45 minutes episode was compared to The Last Jedi, which was a full-fledged movie that you know um that did so much to the franchise and really affected the fans, good and bad, I think. And so it to definitely look at, I just can't help but contrast the two,
Yeah.
and just say that okay, there, this is the right direction. This is the way. With Filoni and with Favreau, um,
Yeah. I
and
agree
I
100.
think I think a lot of the things that were coming out um, from the group that was spearheading it during the sequel trilogy, I think it wasn't wrong. I think it was just a little too. It just was a little too far from
Hmm.
what the heart of Star Wars is, and I can't. I'm not an expert. I can't tell you what the heart of Star Wars is, but ultimately, I think it's just a story about a family, story about friendships, and doing the right thing, all these tropes, I guess. But
Right. But
it's
they put
just such
meaning
a
home. They
yeah,
put beauty on the canvas, and I do
yeah,
want to acknowledge Michael Scholl's comment here. Do you think the franchise will bring back Grogu in episode 10, 11, 12? Let's bookmark that for what next and where that could, that's way down the
now
line.
what?
But
Yeah, yeah,
maybe who knows, man. But my thought, in response to what you're saying here, just all of the reasons Star Wars became what Star Wars was the magic, the mysticism, and I tell you what, dude, and I
yeah,
again, as a prequel kid, as a middle school kid, when the prequels came out, I saw the Jedi at the best, in the height of their prime,
yeah,
in on Coruscant, and it was like, oh, and watching Obi, even the first scenes of Phantom Menace, seeing
right,
Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn, I mean, melt a freaking door, and all of a sudden they're jetting out of the way and all that stuff.
right,
But to see Luke, and we never got to see him. Obviously, we did see it in Rise of Skywalker, where the flashbacks with him and Leia, and they're running through the forest and
yep,
all that. But it's finally we're able to see Luke be as good as his father was, using some of the same forms, even as far as his fighting styles. And I
right,
mean, just the beauty of what Filoni and Favreau are doing, and the undertones of like, hey, traditional fans, hey, new fans, they're kind of feeding you
right.
both at the same time. It's beautiful,
They
man.
get they get that whole concept, and the videos out there of Lucas saying it about how that the stories rhyme. It definitely rhymes, and so
Mhm.
um, yeah. So I mean, I yeah, I'm blown away by how well this was done.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and if any of you out there have watched Clone Wars or are interested in watching Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels, a lot of those shows were headed by Filoni. I mean,
Mhm.
that's like basically his portfolio to for you to see how well he handles Star Wars
Yeah.
content. And if you want to check that out, please do.
For the sake of knowing who Filoni is basically Lucas's Padawan, right? Like, I mean, he
Right,
was
that's right. Yeah,
started Clone Wars, and they kind of walked through the first part of it, and even think of where Ahsoka Tano has come, dude.
right,
Because when she
right.
was first out, I mean, it was you're the next Jar Jar Binks. You can kind of hear the boos from the nosebleeds. Like, it was bad for a while,
Yeah,
and even Ashley
yeah,
Eckstein, like, having to deal with just weird weirdo people, and they're all out there. If it's sports, if it's Star Wars, whatever it is. But all that to say, like, my wife was like, of all the things coming out, and we're all going to discuss this later. I'll just give my wife's preview. Hopefully, she's not upset. I'm spoiling it for everybody. But Ahsoka, and even my sister in law, they kind of connect with Ahsoka, just being a strong kind of badass woman. I mean, mentioning we'll come up to the scene here in a second, but how about Cara Dune? Bo-Katan and female crew just coming in and kicking ass. Man, that was
yeah,
pretty awesome to see.
yeah.
But all that to say, there was a ton happening through. I mean, obviously what they're mixing in, and now we can discuss even with our audience if we would want to go back and do a recap, episode by episode, week by week of Clone Wars, Rebels, or what that would look like. Because maybe Rebels, since it kind of ties in more directly with more familiar characters, but
Yeah,
so much
yeah,
content to
yeah.
notice.
There's a ton of content, and I'm gonna be the first to admit I don't know all the names. I couldn't tell you, a ton of different things, but that's what we, that's why I mean Rebel Base 10 exists. Is we want
Yeah.
people who know these things and want to share these things and are excited about these things to come on by and hang out and talk with us about it. There's going to be a little bit of a lull in content between now and the next, series that opens up. But hey, it's a good time. It's a really good time to talk about Star Wars. So, so where were we when we were recapping Chapter 16, and I think we veered off. So we got through the intro, we got through the Pershing thing, and then they set up. So I think we're at the point where they're setting up
At the
the
bar.
That's right, that's
At
right.
the bar.
And
So
we left off at the Mandalorian stuff, and that's where we took the turn. And what I wanted to say, the point that I wanted to make about the whole Mandalorian thing was, and there's tons of videos already out there about them discussing how Boba Fett's not a Mandalorian and that whole. I just again, it's a testament to the writing. I mean, they're definitely telling a story here, and contrasting the two groups of Mandalorians. Really, the show is still even defining what what Mandalorians are. So I think that yeah, so they're definitely going to head down that direction, and I think we're going to see more
Yeah.
about that. But to your point about the characters that they've assembled, and especially the female characters like Bo-Katan, so strong, great. I mean, they're really, really good. I mean, like, you definitely want these people on your team to take out,
Mhm.
any remaining Empire
Yeah. It's
factions.
I was thinking when we rewatched it last night with my in-laws and my sister-in-law, and got to see it with them for the first time and kind of relive it, which is I just like love watching people's reactions. But
Yeah.
all that to say, no, just the process of the putting the meat to the bone of the characters is you can kind of tell. And I know obviously I don't want to trash the sequels. There's parts I love, there's parts I don't love, there's good, bad, and ugly, and everyone's got their opinions. I will go ahead and say we're going to keep it very civil at Rebel Base 10, regardless of where you're coming from in the galaxy and which side of the Force. Like, we're all welcome. But the discussion begins where, for me, of even going forward, like, with the new projects and knowing Ahsoka, I think Rangers of the New Republic. I think there's one more, maybe Andor, that will be produced by Favreau and by Filoni, specifically produced by them. And it's like, well, what are we talking about? And but all that to say, you can tell in this series, which is kind of the new standard to me, versus the sequels standard of Poe Dameron. Oscar Isaac didn't know anything about his backstory, even the idea of his family having some ties to being force sensitive. I think his mother was force sensitive, or he was
Hmm.
force sensitive because he was. I think they had a force tree, I believe, if I've looked into the lore that deep into it as far as his story. Um, which I'd love to get into more with that kind of stuff. And I don't, we can do, Mike. We can go wherever you want to
Uh,
go. I feel like you're just salivating right now.
no,
Let's.
it's just there's just so much. I mean, there really is a lot. Like I really think we have enough to talk about to going starting maybe from the original trilogy on
Mhm.
through to prequel and then sequel. Um, and yeah, I think it's there's a lot to talk about. But yeah, I agree with you. The whole to me, and maybe this is you know they didn't give us a lot of Poe Dameron. It didn't seem like they were willing to take us through Poe Dameron's story
Yeah.
because they were definitely gonna sell like the comic books, to open up. I think there is a comic book out there or a graphic novel series about Poe Dameron's family and even like his parents and who they were for the
Yeah.
rebellion. So there's a lot of that stuff. I haven't read it yet. I know I was excited when Disney got Lucasfilm and there was all these plans for a sequel trilogy and then all basically sequel content. I definitely hopped on board for the comics and I read a lot of the new Star Wars stuff that was coming out, and a lot of the to go back to that question of what happened to Luke after. Some of these comics do address that question. What is albeit some of these stories were like in between Empire and Return of the Jedi versus immediately after Return of the Jedi. So
Yeah. I
I do
know
know that.
parts of, excuse me, parts of Battlefront 2, there's the movie plot story kind of side of it had Luke, going through to meet Dill, I believe his name was, but basically finding one of the Emperor's relics of a old time, either Sith or Jedi compass, which led him to Octu, where I think
Okay.
he, and that was, I believe, I mean, right after the Battle of Jakku, I believe, 4 years after, Return of the Jedi. But no, there is so much we could dig into, and even if it's one of those things that we just jump on here solo one night, and hey, I'm knee deep in a YouTube hole, and we've been looking at this, and I want to discuss with you guys. And again, if you're watching, this is a platform for all of us. We're not spitting all the knowledge. We want to hear from you guys. Correct us, give us the names if we're stumbling. But yeah, this is one of those things, man, just to discuss, especially such a good story right now with the Mandalorian.
Mhm.
But let's jump forward here. Obviously, let's kind of jump up to Death Troopers. Obviously, Mando facing off with one of them in the hallway, getting the better of obviously the Death Trooper getting the better of Mando and Din Djarin. Um,
Right.
when he pulled the latch, did you believe that they were gone, or were you thinking? Because
I
I was
was
on one side, and others of my friends were on other sides as well.
I was relieved. I mean, I really was, because I mean, yeah, that one gave him a hard time, and they did a good job of showing how tough these Cylons, I mean these Death Troopers are. So it's cool. Yeah, I wasn't expecting the platoon to come back. I guess I just wasn't thinking about it. It was the episode was definitely just rolling on, and then I mean, right after that is when he meets Moff Gideon, right? Or like he's basically in Grogu's chamber, or when Moff Gideon and him show down.
And company get to the bridge, and he
Right.
gets to the brig, I guess, and then that's whenever. And that's one thing too. I guess not to jump too far ahead. Obviously, the Death Troopers will come back into the conversation, but with Moff Gideon kind of setting up Din Djarin without him knowing, as a true Mandalorian, of what he was getting himself into by fighting him, going to battle, essentially for Mandalore.
Yeah.
It's like, and I know we're going to talk about now what after kind of the recap, but I mean, Moff Gideon's playing some chess over here, and it's one of
Absolutely.
the things, even now of him, he's basically been knocked out by Cara Dune.
Yeah.
What's to come for him. But what did you think of the scene of even the exchange? Did you believe that he was actually going to give him over now that he has his blood?
I really did. I really did. I think it's a testament to Giancarlo's Esposito's acting. We were introduced to this character at the end of season 1, and he had his thing, and you find out that he has the dark saber and everything, but we really didn't see him in action, and so we've been able to see him throughout the season play chess and be calculated, and plant the tracker, and then get to Grogu with the dark troopers. So when he was saying, hey, like take him, I don't need him, I already got what I wanted, I was like, okay, this is interesting. Maybe maybe this is like a move on his part. But then you turn your back on an enemy, and it's just like, you're inviting. So it was a surprise. It was definitely a surprise that he was all of a sudden willing to wipe out the Mandalorian.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back for a second, because his moment in Giancarlo Esposito's acting ability of making us all believe that this guy's like, look, obviously they were saying the light cruiser carries hundreds or maybe thousands of troopers or whatnot. Now they have a fraction of that, and it's one of those things where going back to is it Dr. Schilling?
Pershing. I think it's Pershing. Yeah, I think it's Dr. Pershing. Yeah.
Pershing basically just all of a sudden helping Bo-Katan, and hey, here's what this is. Here's the bridge. Here's the brig. Here's the Death Troopers. Here's the route you want to take. All that to say, but that's what it kind of set me up to believe that Moff Gideon is legitimately saying, look, we're done. We're good. And obviously the cloning, the cloning side of it's probably a hired hand as well of them saying,
right,
like the cloners on Camino were, which
right.
obviously until then that cloning was a thing. Aside from Obi-Wan telling Luke about it in episode 4,
right?
All that to say, but I mean, there's a lot happening there. So I for myself, I was like, okay, I legit like, how is this going to go? Because the Death Troopers are gone. He's basically outnumbered. What now? So I was definitely duped. And then the fight that happened afterwards, all of a sudden, Jedi Master Din Djarin can swing this Beskar spear around like he is. I mean, like he's trained for his entire life. And I mean, he's a bounty hunter, so I'm sure he's got the skills, but I didn't know his skills go that far.
Right. I wasn't. I think that's another thing that they've introduced. I can't tell you when exactly in the entire canon they talked about Beskar armor, but obviously they've made this thing. They've sold this thing to us like it's adamantium, or and
galaxy far, far away.
Exactly, and so I didn't know that it could repel. I mean, obviously in the Ashoka episode, you find out that it can stop lightsabers. But I mean, yeah, I wasn't. I was pretty impressed with how he could play. He could play D with his Beskar armor, and it's a
But what
good
I
thing.
love, oh sorry, what I loved about a spear is when the dark saber made contact, it would heat up in the
It would
red.
heat up. That's
Oh,
right.
dude, it was beautiful. And then even
Yeah.
through the actual fighting, which I'm always kind of comparing to the original trilogy compared to the
Right.
prequels of and there's the sequels that are kind of in between, I guess, below more towards the OG. But even now, this series and even probably the new Marvel version of Star Wars, which I'm 100% okay with, if this is what we're going to be getting.
Right.
But all to say, it's beautifully shot, and it's like the Game of Thrones set the standard, and I fully believe I wasn't a watcher at the very beginning of Game of Thrones, and now I jumped in and rewatched everything. I think this is the show that's going to be obviously season 3. Obviously, there's plenty of stuff for people to dig into and really have a conversation about and learn about the lore and the history and the Star Wars galaxy. But all that to say, I just love that they are putting in just the music in this episode too, man. When
Yeah.
the Death Troopers are kicking up and
Yeah.
just that. Oh man, it's a different flavor, but it's a brand new generation of Star Wars, and it hits on all cylinders for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so when the platoon comes out of nowhere and like Fennec says when the doesn't Bo-Katan ask like,
Yeah, how
how
many
many life forms and zero or like none? You're like, "Oh, they have jetpacks and oh, they're coming back." But like
right?
they totally do the Iron Man thing where they come down and like they crash down. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
great. It's totally great. So,
beautiful.
so when that scene like started rolling out, I really didn't know like how they were going to handle this because I mean these are practically indestructible,
Hmm.
um, and so I thought it was there is something to be said of the remnants of the Empire going back to using droids because droids were introduced in the prequel trilogies. That was the main force or army that was used, that the enemy used. So it's interesting that they decided to do that. Yeah, I really did not know how this episode was going to end, and
Yeah.
so when the Death Troopers are banging on that door, I'm just like, what exactly is going to happen? So
No, I was right there with you, and I'm thinking, as Moff Gideon is basically laying out, in a few moments you will all be dead, and only the child and I will survive. It's just like,
right,
dude,
okay,
you could read it as foreshadowing, and it's like, oh Lord, but then all of a sudden, the alarm's going off, X-wings in approach, and as soon as you see the X-wing, I'm thinking, surely not just one X-wing of the New Republic is showing up, or
right.
it's say
Like,
it's
who is this person?
it's
Yeah,
Carl Weathers coming back through, all of a sudden he's going to come in and save the day. But no, and at first I'm thinking, okay, Ahsoka, maybe they use the finale to
yeah,
propel the introduction of Ezra Bridger.
right.
Where I thought they were going to go. And I'm
That was my wife's guess when I was like, guess who showed up? She was
okay,
like Ezra Bridger, and I was like, that would have been cool, but no,
dude. Well,
yeah,
my thing
no,
I think that could be to come, obviously, in
yeah,
Ahsoka. We'll discuss the future in a little bit, but so much to discuss. We got to like compact it into our little sections here, but no, man, and as soon as you see the green saber, obviously the black glove,
I
the heavy,
still I still didn't believe, man. Like it was just like saw the X-wing. I'm like, all right. I mean, is that Luke?
yeah,
Immediately thought Luke, and then walked myself out of that. And then the lightsaber shows up, or you see. I think it's the black and white version. Like you see like the security footage,
right, which I
and you
love.
see a cloaked figure walking through, and you're like, did they really do this? Like, did they really bring Luke into this? And all of a sudden you see like the Jedi doing his thing, and
Yeah,
then they cut to the full color, and you see that lightsaber and you see that glove, and you're like, holy crap, this is really happening. I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about it again. Like this is
yeah.
really happening.
It was
That
it was one of those moments, movie moments, man, where you just
Yeah,
like it's the magic of the movie. And I was thinking until I saw the saber, and I'm actually currently replaying Jedi Fallen Order, Fallen Jedi, however
oh
the
yeah,
hell's
yeah,
going. Cal Kestis. I was like, please, at some way, can Cal Kestis And I'm like, I know he's a little bit more of a reach to really, from a video game.
Yeah.
Ezra Bridger's one thing, but then from a video game, I mean, I would love to see, obviously, the sequel to that game, and even if they have a series there, or branching off from that. I just hope that everything that Star Wars is producing right now grows roots and just starts either growing together and connecting more story, which obviously will over time, but
Mhm.
then all of a sudden, and here's what I love of what they're doing. I think some people will say they're retconning the sequels, excuse me, but this is, I mean, the prequels took place in a matter of days. I think less
Mhm.
than like 36 hours, right? Like, and
Right.
obviously the original trilogy took place over the course of what, 5 years, I believe, if my memory serves, maybe 70 years at most. But
Mhm.
all that to say, like, they have so much space in the galaxy now that they're getting to the unknown regions and introducing. I mean, Ahsoka's going to the unknown regions just like they
Right.
did in Rise of Skywalker. I'm getting long winded because there is so much. I just want to get it all out. But I'm thinking from here and now that they've established Luke in this series and the new canon officially as another extension of his storyline, that we are finally seeing the guy that we know. I fully expect at some point, if it's Sebastian Shaw or if it's deep fake wannabe, well, we can discuss that in a little bit. Of kind of the CG didn't look great, but do we see some type of fill in for Luke of the real pain that he must have gone through to have a new Jedi Order, new Padawans, Jedi Knights, and all of a sudden Ben Solo goes south and he's gone? Like, how much do you think that would devastate a guy? And that's what rhetorical question, but that's what I want to see. Just because I think a lot of original fans, myself included in that, deserve to know what he went through if they're going to be willing to give us the type of emotion that we got in this episode. They're putting so
Right.
much meat to it, and I love it. But what did you think? I mean, obviously Luke's CGI wasn't spectacular. Maybe they'll upload some type of update here, but
Trey, I don't care that it was like imperfect. I don't like, as long as it was really him. You know what I mean? Like, I was thinking, I was like, my man did not get like he like got a haircut and everything. Like, he didn't look exactly like he did in
yeah,
Jedi, but I really could care. I couldn't care less that it was like the CG was a little warped or whatever.
yeah,
I'm just happy that we finally got to see
mhm,
Luke after
yeah.
and we find out that. So I mean, I think the first thing that I reached out to you about when we talked about this episode on Friday was
It's always this first
it's
text
like,
of like, have you seen it yet?
have you seen it? Yeah, yeah. Have you seen it yet? I was texting all my friends, including my buddy Mike here, that like, have you seen it? Have you seen it? Do not spoil it for yourself.
Yeah,
But I think the first thing that you and I talked about was like how they made this reintroduction of Luke
mhm,
totally rhyme with Rogue, that awesome scene in Rogue One where Vader goes through and is just destroying
the fog and
rebel
everything.
troopers. Yeah,
Yeah,
the fog and everything. And it was just like, oh, here's that rhyming thing again. And they totally executed that well. You do get, I think a lot of really awesome people have already put the video up online of
mhm.
just the juxtaposition of those things happening. And you can see, like, there's this hate and fear, in Vader. And then in Luke, it's just calm, collected,
It's
like every move is elegant. It's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
That was something. I mean, just the contrast again. Like, they are putting, and my mother-in-law is an artist. She's an art teacher at a school in Atlanta. She, sometimes I'll kind of poke her brain about art, and she'll ask me about football. And she watched the episode with us, and she's like, "Hey, obviously we had to have a little bit of a contextual discussion for characters." But she was like, "Yeah, I thought it was great." And then, I mean, all that to say, they are putting the detail into this art, and I just think it is. That was one thing of just, especially it being Luke. And I
Mhm.
do want to acknowledge, I'm sorry here for the delay, Armando, asking how did Boba Fett survive the Sarlacc pit. I think we can discuss that here in a little bit, but we will get to that just as Michael Scholl's comment as well. But just the appreciation, and I don't know why there's anyone saying it's fan service. It's just considerate care of these beloved characters, but they're
Right.
also saying, put that stuff aside. Let's just make a damn good series. Let's
Right.
put some elbow grease and put some love into it. But anyways, like, yeah, I agree with you, man. They could have put a potato sack over Luke's head, or just kept him over that robe, or
They kind of did.
yeah, it's like, yeah, put him up, put the hood up, and that was one thing too. My wife was saying he did all that stuff going through the hallway and coming up that,
Yeah.
yeah, dude, with his hood up, and all of a
Right.
sudden he walks in like an absolute Jedi master. And
Yeah.
I mean, what's amazing to see is, just like you said, I mean, his demeanor is very much Return to the Jedi, and
Mhm.
obviously the passing of his father, coming away from that, and he seems, because again, I think my generation, younger episodes, 7 or 1, 2, 3, and then 7, 8, 9,
Mhm.
they lose the reality of what Luke went through from
Right.
losing. I mean, think of the first 20 minutes of A New Hope.
Right.
Your aunt and
Right.
uncle get roasted. All
Right.
of a sudden, your guy mentions that, hey, I know your dad. You want to come with me
Yeah.
to Alderaan and we'll teach you about the Force? Like, what the
Right.
hell? But
Yeah.
all that, just the consideration. And again, I think everyone connects with Luke because he went through so much. There's 3
Mhm.
different movies, and spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't seen the original trilogy and legitimately considering them as new
Yeah.
fans.
Yeah.
I think there's reeling in a lot of people, but it's amazing to see the detail that they're putting into it. But I wanted to kind of move on to, I know we're getting to about the 45-minute mark, and Mike, I'm good to go as long as you'd like to go, brother.
Yeah,
You just
man.
kind of
Let's
give me
keep
the
going. Sounds good.
cool. I do want to discuss here, Armando and Michael. We'll get to your question here in a second, but about Grogu being a potential in 10, 11, 12. Armando Faril, mi hermano de Mexico Ciudad. A question: how does Boba Fett survive the Sarlacc pit? And this has been something that people were saying. Oh, Boba's dead. It's an imposter. Is it another clone? Is this an extension of the Bad Batch? Like, could this be one of these guys that they make a live action character and we all think it's Boba Fett? All right, and Mike, I'll give my rendition, and you tell me what you think, and we'll fill in the blanks. Because from what I've understood, nothing's officially canon of the actual process of him getting out of the Sarlacc pit. To my knowledge, there might be comic books, but from what I understand, and given his um, uh, the staff he's carrying, the weaponry that he came in with before he had his armor back, the gaffy sticks, the black robes, which he's now wearing underneath his armor, which I think looks awesome, will also be great on the stocks of the shelves of stock toy stores around.
Yeah.
All that to say, I believe he got out somehow. It takes 1,000 years for one of these things to digest you, and I believe all his hair, eyebrows, everything's gone because the acid in a Sarlacc pit, obviously is going to slowly digest you over 1,000 years. If he's able to crawl out, who knows if his jetpack kicked back on and put him, push him through part of the sand, or he just crawled out. I believe and again, if you're watching and the actual stories from chapter whatever book, fill it in. But the Tusken Raiders basically nursed him back to health. That's how he began to develop. And here's the thing about this book of Boba. And now that we're in the now what section, again, new fans, younger fans who may not know this, the Hutt family, and again, Clone Wars, Rebels, all these things that we want to go through and discuss and get this down together freshly if you've already watched it. But the Hutt family is the mafia, basically. And now that Boba Fett, who was tight with them, probably worked for, and as you saw in episode 4, worked for Jabba. He was with him, I basically, to get Han Solo and kind of making the threat offer deal that they made. But no, I just think Boba Fett, the book of Boba Fett, he is the perfect, what could have been character to come back and resurrect his story arc.
Yeah.
And to fill in, because there has been so much the Rebels and all these other stories and stuff of his childhood, adolescence, teenage years. I mean, I would love to see so many of the characters and more characters from Rebels pop in. But it's one of those things that they're extending. I was like, what are they going to tell about Boba? But they could go through and even start the series. And again, I'm sorry to be long-winded. They could go back from that time to show us in a flashback or make the series lead up to date, and then take off next season or season 3 or whatever it is. That's the beauty of what this timeline does right now, because it's wide open to do whatever they want to do with it.
Yeah.
So
I think. Yeah.
give your
I
thoughts
was.
on both.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. I think that. I think that what we will most likely see next December is how he actually gets out. I think that's just going to be part of it. I think we're going to see flashbacks of his time spent, basically surviving and getting himself back together. I mean, one of the questions that I had was, why didn't he just take the armor back himself from Cobb Vanth? Like, he could have just. I mean, he was at the very end of the first episode of this second season of Mandalorian. He was watching at a distance.
Maybe that's part of that story for the Book of Boba.
That's right.
Maybe there's a with Cobb Vanth, but sorry, I don't.
It's telling that they called the series. They're calling the series the Book of Boba Fett. Because it's a book has a beginning, middle, and end, and so we've seen a little bit. Maybe we'll see the beginning of how he got. Like, a beginning could be him getting out, and the middle is where we're at now with him, and how and what happens with him as the at the helm of the mafia of the Hutt.
And obviously, I do want to obviously acknowledge the post-credit scene. We didn't actually discuss that. I think we did prior to hitting live, but obviously, Bib Fortuna has put on some weight. And what I love that they're making Finnick Boba's sidekick, and I love her. I love her. Obviously, her whatever happened. I thought she was dead last season. I was convinced. And Boba basically brings her back, and I'm thinking, hey, if Maul can survive, Obi-Wan Kenobi's, basically cutting in half, and obviously anything's possible.
Wait, did you know? Did you think, like last season, did you think that was Boba Fett that went up to her and got her out? I really didn't know who that character was. I mean, I guess.
The black robes now kind of point back to it, but the spurs, man, the spurs are always a Selford Boba. We kind of hear it clinking and clinking, but that's it's obviously we're expecting some guy to be wearing boots and grayish shorts and some knee pads that have some rockets ready to roll out and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's where they're throwing off the people who would have any type of scent onto the trail of the story. And even I know leaks are out there all the time. I think every sequel movie was basically spoiled prior to the release in some way. All that to say that I'm loving that. Again, traditional fans, new fans can connect on a story where we don't really know where it's going. Obviously, they're bringing in the Thrawns. That's one thing too. Where they go now? My thing is with Din Djarin, obviously Bo-Katan, and now Mandalore.
Yeah.
What there's going to be a battle. Do I know how it's going to go, or do I want to talk about how it's going to go? No, I want to sit and wait and watch and pop some popcorn and just thing unfold. But what do you think?
Right.
I mean,
I think for to answer the whole. Yeah, to answer the now what, I think for the next season, because one of the first things I Googled was, will there be a season 3 of The Mandalorian? It's primed for, I mean, technically Din Djarin is leader of all of Mandalorian. So, I mean, all of the Mandalorians. Yeah. So, I mean, technically he is. I think there was some debate about why Bo-Katan couldn't just take the Darksaber, but I think it's because there's so much story to tell. So we're going to see all that, I think, in the rollout in season 3. I think what's going to happen next is we're going to see more of like that. You were talking earlier about the progression of the character and like obviously a huge progression is him taking his mask off or his helmet off at the end of the episode. So, that was you're starting to see him, basically adopt, a different way, and we'll see that up against what Bo-Katan believes and her group, and so I'm looking forward to that. The Boba Fett stuff. Yeah, I don't know. We just talked about that, how that's going to work out. Not too sure, really, but I'm hoping that they do answer that question of how he survived. I'm kind of recapping here on a few other things. Oh, the one thing that I definitely wanted to say about it would be awesome if they just gave Luke his own trilogy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Solo, was a great movie. It got panned, but he got his own movie. I wouldn't mind just one, Luke story that takes place after, Return of the Jedi, but before the Force Awakens.
Yeah.
I think that as soon as they make that announcement at an investors meeting, that's what I would like to see. One of the questions that I had, and maybe whoever's watching can answer this, is Grogu Luke's first Padawan? Is he the first of the new Jedi Order?
Yeah.
I definitely made the association that, oh yeah, like Kylo got rid of a bunch of Luke's students. So that would be interesting to see Grogu and Kylo go up against one another. But I would like to learn more about how Grogu gets trained, and
I mean, and people would sink their teeth into it for obvious reasons. That's kind of if you give a Luke series, you got to have a Vader series, right? Like you got to
right.
I mean, there's some stuff, Dark Empire or Shattered Empire stories that we could put some live action bones to, and I mean, it's those.
And that's
things,
the consensus.
Yeah,
I think that
that's the interest of people.
Right. I think that's the consensus, and I think the other thing that Lucasfilm is now listening to is people definitely had a reaction to a lot of the novels becoming legends or being folded under a legends title instead of canon, and so they're borrowing a lot from those things. And I think they've been making some good choices recently about which things to borrow.
Yeah, and there's I mean, here's the thing with this new lineup of shows. I mean, I know different variations, and people want to see Yusong Bong come through, and maybe they're rebranded in a different system or whatnot, and they could be a different people group. But you're pulling stories, obviously, with Thrawn, like the Timothy on series of Thrawn. I've heard is up there with some of the best as far as non-Star Wars canon and Star Wars canon, together, and even like obviously Dark being in there. There is so much lore, and even talking like we're talking about with Mandalorian, and actually them establishing the culture and the history, and us seeing and feeling the impact of the Mandalorian culture. Because now, the now what question for me too of are we going to see the history of Din Djarin being raised by Mandalorians and what it was like to be brought up by a Mandalorian Death Watch? It's one of those things. That we could discuss. I do want to get to what now for. I know Michael Schultz's question's kind of been over here on the block. Do you think the franchise will bring back Grogu for 10, 11, 12? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to take a little stab at that. I don't know if there's going to be an episode 10, 11, or 12. I think that from what I know, I think that these 9 movies that have come out sort of end the Skywalker saga, or at least that's how Disney's been pushing it. Is that these 9 episodes? What I do think is that we'll definitely see another trilogy. I know that's in the works. Do I think Grogu would be in those? Maybe, because I mean they've obviously set up his character as someone that's very powerful that needs to be trained. So I would love to go back to I would love to see a Luke movie with Grogu. Or another trilogy with just them. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, as far as the question, I think I agree. The Skywalker series is done, but are they going to do a Grogu trilogy when he's? I mean, that's the thing. Obviously, for him to be of age where we're going to recognize what he's saying and he's actually like fully functioning as a Jedi, that could be hundreds of years away since we're brand new to the aging and the progression of the species of Yoda and now Grogu.
Right.
So all that to say, of thinking through how far they're going to try and line themselves up, because now Luke's no longer the Jedi Master like a Yoda was.
Right.
Yoda's species, and now Grogu taking the kind of the baton. Obviously he's cute, but there's obviously much more to tell for his story besides just selling the toys that obviously my kids want with his action figure and stuff.
Have you purchased some gear for the kids? Yeah. Nice.
I'll
nice.
give one of these.
Yeah.
As far as I've been told by the boss of the house.
Yeah.
As far as Luke, I would love to see maybe him and Grogu have a series, and that's one thing too of kind of getting into the most I'm most excited for of the new content, I wanted to pull in that photo that you sent me of Kathleen Kennedy with all the new productions. I've got the graphic
Yeah.
at the bottom. Let's see if I can pull it up for everybody in case you're
Let
watching.
me Mike ask another real quick question, and while you're doing that, I'm just going to address that real quick. What do you guys think about Moff Gideon taking Grogu's blood for research? I think that from what I've seen online, they're tying that somehow to the New Order in the sequel trilogy, and my guess and what I think is what a lot of people are saying is that it's getting tied to how Snoke was maybe possibly created. We all know from what's it called, from the Rise of Skywalker, that we saw pieces of a Snoke type character in a tank, and I think we did see like a similar type of life form in a tank in the Mandalorian series recently. So there's definitely resurgence in cloning, and this time it's cloning Jedi, or at least cloning people that have the midichlorian count to control the Force. So
that was that was originally a part of a now legend story where they were trying to, obviously with the Emperor and even with Ray's father, Ray Palpatine's father, of them successfully cloning him. From what I understand, Ray's father was I don't know if by which, if it was a cloning deal or if it was an actual sexually reproductive born and birthed child. Maybe again, if you're watching, you guys can help us out or find us on Twitter, RebelBase10 on Twitter, and obviously our handles Trey Wynn, TRESWINN, and Mike PR Flores. Connect with us and give us your thoughts. But it's something to me that, I think it's got something to do with Snoke. How much of that is Palpatine? Because a lot of again, like they're going to try and take the story a different section of the galaxy, I believe, with a lot of this stuff, and then obviously at the same time, according to what we heard in Rise of the Skywalker, Palpatine's been, old Sheev's been back there, pulling the strings, just like he's been doing throughout the entire prequel, sequel, OG sequel trilogy now, which I did not love. We can get into
like I was gonna say, like, dude, you're striking a chord. Like we could talk about that for hours. That whole dial in.
Yeah, no, that's something too. But let's
let me just say this though. I love the Emperor as a character. I mean, like like as far as being a big villain, you definitely have to have a strong villain, and the Emperor was that. So that is cool. But how that relates to the sequel trilogy, we could talk about that at another time.
Yeah, and that's its own podcast.
Right.
But all that to say, I'm most excited for, and I know we thought we had kind of the similar first one. I think a lot of the OG appreciators are. I'm Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's my favorite.
Yes, of course. The entire
saga. His story. Excuse me. For the sake of what could come between him and Anakin, and then him and Luke, and the Lars family, and who knows what else. And here's one thing I thought about today, of really kind of thinking like, okay, again, the Rescue and the Mandalorian series as a whole has been that standard of like, here's where we can really go, is to let your imagination go there now.
Mm-hmm.
And who was the person that taught Yoda how to commune with those who have passed on to be one with the Force?
Right.
Qui-Gon Jinn,
Yeah, man.
That's things, man. As much as I personally love, because you got to think, Vader went through some stuff, Luke went through some stuff, but Obi-Wan Kenobi, dude.
Yeah.
Went through some stuff to do. I mean, he was riding passenger seat to the whole Anakin Skywalker saga, if you will.
Yeah. I don't think Liam Neeson's making those movies he makes all the time now about like a kidnapped daughter. I think so. Hopefully they'll call him in to be Qui-Gon. Yeah. No, so
that even on Tatooine, does he leave Tatooine? Does he go discuss, or does he commune with Yoda? Like, we have to see Yoda. And but what are you most excited for, Mike?
Well, so I was just to riff off of the Obi-Wan, that was definitely number one for me, as far as, and I'll say that it was number one because I was super excited when Obi-Wan showed up in Rebels, and we get to see that version of the older version of him in Rebels. So that was really cool. The other series that I'm definitely excited for is the Cassian Andor series, Andor. I think that there was a lot of talk about this happening. I think that Rogue One was a I mean was a great movie. I mean, it's a good Star Wars movie. I mean, a lot of people loved it, and I think that they did some really really awesome stuff with those characters, and now we get to see his backstory. There was a lot of weight in his role, in that role for him to be sort of like the assassin kind of type character for the rebellion. So I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about him and what he's doing, what he had done
Yeah,
for the cause.
100%. I think I told you earlier. I'm stoked to see most likely the return of K2SO. I
Yes.
mean, here's some of the full lineup. You kind of see our background there. Sorry, but I wanted to at least put this up for all of us to see. Some of these, obviously, Children of the Blood and Bone, Indiana Jones, Willow, are obviously not Skywalker or Star Wars productions. Um, Rogue Squadron was one that kind of piqued my interest. Obviously,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the
Yep.
expectation there is fantastic. Here's my thing with Lando. You mentioned, you obviously mentioning Solo. This
Hmm.
has to produce a Solo sequel
Yeah.
or bring Han in. Maybe they tie it in at some point. Maybe my thing is again like there was, and even like you mentioned with the episode The Rescue, of the tie-in of the hallway scene with Vader and paralleling
Right.
that for Luke. The appreciation of Gareth Edwards is like all the more every time I see Rogue One now. I'm just like that one guy, just clap him like,
Yep.
yeah,
That's
you're
right.
killing me. So it's just one of those things to me of really allowing them to with all of this stuff. But like you mentioned with Andor and then Lando, let
Yeah.
some of these new creatives come in and
Yeah.
what is it going to look like with Lando? And I mean, Han
Right.
Solo, I think deserves another round of filling in some of those areas for him in that same time frame.
I was hoping that they would do, like, if Solo could be a chapter one, then Lando could be a chapter two. You know, and then
That's
why
true.
not make Chewbacca chapter three and close out that trilogy? You know what I mean? Like,
Be interesting.
I don't know. That's kind of wild because we don't really understand him.
All these
Wookiee.
are series, right? I mean, all these new
Right.
productions are 100% series. The
Yeah.
droid story, I'm expecting like a kid, directed or targeted show,
Mm.
which is obviously nice. Visions. Do you know much about Visions? I've not seen them.
No, I don't think I don't. I haven't learned too much about it. The one thing that I did want to say when you brought up Rogue Squadron was I loved the Patty Jenkins intro to
Yes.
her putting together Rogue Squadron. I was just like, wow, like this is this is really neat. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman 84 is going to be on HBO Max, but this is the person responsible for that story. So I'm looking forward to what she does, and it sounds like it's a personal story for her.
Yeah.
So
Infinity.
it's yeah. So if
I
you
love
guys
it.
can check that out, check that out. So yeah, the one series on this list that I think that I mean obviously I'm definitely really excited for is the Ashoka series. I
Mhm.
think that we didn't really talk about this too much, but the Rosario Dawson casting is her perfect. The episode with her perfect. So they have the right person to sort of bring that on. And I think she's like a veteran too, because I mean she was in the Daredevil series, and she's quite the actress. So I'm
Oh,
looking forward to that. But the one that's most intriguing to me is this one called The Acolyte. And I know what acolytes are because of the games that have been out there, but I don't know what this is really going to be. I think the most recent thing I heard that it has something to do with the Old Republic or the High Republic or whatever they're calling the series. But yeah, that's I'm curious about that one because that
oh yeah.
seems to be more of like a dark side type series.
I will say, I mean, with the progression of Game of Thrones, like we talked about, the height of which that show got to, and then for them to take it that dark route, and no spoilers for any Game of Thrones people, but obviously the way it turned out there, of them going in Star Wars of let's really see, and especially even with Rebels, of how much they went into these Sith holocrons and Sith temples and Maul trying to even I was watching recently the way that Maul would tell Kanan, our apprentice, talking about Ezra, our apprentice is up here doing. I'm like, this
Yeah,
guy's a freaking con artist, and he's one of
yeah,
the best, you know. But I
yeah,
mean, to be, again, Rebels and Clone War history of him, his story of going to Mandalore and all that happened there. But even now, of do we see, and even in the Lando series, do we see him tie in? There's
right.
so many ifs and potentials. From what I saw, by the way, with Visions, I do have Wikipedia up here. Credit them on this information. So, Star Wars Visions is an upcoming animated anthology television series. Its initial release will comprise 10 anime-inspired short films
Oh,
from various Japanese animation studios. So that's maybe it's a Jedi or an early animation of some form of Jedi, or who knows. I think
yeah,
whatever it is, and even the Bad Batch. Obviously, the animation side is not going to necessarily pique my interest too much. I didn't really. I'm not that generation, I guess, of Star Wars fan to really take to the clone troopers or the clone story. It's kind of like you're here, we kind of
mm,
like you. Obviously, there's some story there, but there's not a whole lot of backstory. The
yeah,
Rangers of the New Republic, I have to look into that one because again, it's a Favreau Filoni production. I'm if that is on there, I'm 100% here for it.
yeah.
But all to say, man. Any other thoughts on the new series, Mike?
Nope, nope, nope. No other thoughts. Just want more stuff and want it now.
We're gonna go
Like,
full Baruch. I want it now.
no, I mean,
Uh,
like, come on, like, put out something in March at least, guys. Disney Plus, please. Just kidding. I
and
don't
that's
know.
let me ask you this, man, because my wife and I were talking on the way back. We were in Atlanta this weekend. Are we going to see more theatrical releases from Lucasfilm, or are we going to see just Disney Plus straight series, and maybe see movie series released on Disney Plus?
My guess is that they are in a they're reevaluating
Yeah.
after what's happened. I think they're reevaluating, and also too with COVID and how that's changed the movie industry. I think that they're thinking about that as well. I hope we see more theatrical releases. Obviously, it might just go straight to Disney Plus, which I'm okay with too. But
Right.
but yeah, I think they're reevaluating. I think I don't know where I know that the guys from Game of Thrones were contracted at one point to write another Star Wars series, but they dropped out, or there was some conflict or conflict of interest or whatever. Actually, I don't know. Don't quote me. I'm just
Yeah.
stirring the pot. No, I don't know what, but they just left. I know Ryan Johnson, who did The Last Jedi, is definitely working on something, and a lot of people were curious as to why his stuff wasn't announced at all recently.
Mhm.
So I think it's in the works. I think that whatever they do, they have to have Favreau and Filoni, and please, I mean, even Lucas, just bring George back in. And I think recently there's a new book that's coming out called Star Wars Archives. I think 1995 to 2005, or not 1995. I'm sorry. It's a new book, and he talks a little bit in that book about what he was originally going to do in the sequel trilogy. Just Google it.
Yeah.
Um, and and why not have the guy who started it all be in the room, to talk and brainstorm and create, and see where it goes.
Yeah. And that was
So
something too. Just 1 second here. After watching the episode, asking, obviously tying Luke back in. I know that
yeah,
Lucas has been on set. He's been a part of obviously Filoni's development as a director from going to animation now to live action, and who better to kind of continue his growth into live action directing than John Favreau. That guy, I could talk a while about him, but all that to
hmm
say, like, I think as far as you made the comment about Ryan Johnson not being featured or his film not being kind of discussed at the investors meeting. I wouldn't want to put Ryan Johnson in front of a bunch of investors and say, "Hey, we're going to put this movie out that
yeah, like
everyone
for business. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah,
already
like
hates." But I mean, maybe they're going to use that for D23. If and when that takes place next year. But I'm kind of saying that in jest. Obviously, I'm not as a I feel like I'm kind of if it's there's the original trilogy crew and
Yeah.
there's a new age. I feel like I'm kind of right in that middle where I've got a foot in both camp. Where you know I don't necessarily want to see more Ryan Johnson, man.
Well,
I
so
mean,
you're gonna. I think we hit on this a little bit at one point, but I guess I can just end my part of this pod with this. And whoever's listening, you're welcome to disagree, but I thought that The Last Jedi was the best film of the sequel trilogy. I thought it was the most well thought out, most well put together of the three. And so I'm not a Ryan Johnson hater. I did like his movie Brick and Looper before he took over for The Last Jedi. Was I upset?
had the whole
Yeah.
debacle.
Yeah. Was I upset? And did I think it was divisive? Maybe you'll have to stay tuned to the next episode of Rebel Base 10 to to find out. But yeah, I still watch The Last Jedi from time to time to try to understand like what try to really like pick out some of the things that were really interesting and that I wish would have been explored more in The Rise of Skywalker. But again, that's for another episode.
Yeah, no, that is something I think could take up quite a bit of time, and obviously, I think we could go through the entire series of movies if we wanted to, and kind of just say,
Yeah.
all right, let's. And with the beauty for all those that are watching or will watch or listen to this at some point, the beauty of what we're trying to do is now the technology with Disney Plus, we can put a link out from one of our Disney Plus accounts, and we can all, as a Rebel Base 10 community, watch a movie at a certain time, and even do it live, obviously off screen, and we can live react and comment. Which I mean, I'm sure tons of folks have already done across YouTube and other platforms, but we're out here in the South in Tennessee, and we're making sure our rebellion is also represented throughout as at whatever level we can get to. But no, I think the Ryan Johnson conversation, obviously being relevant to the topic that we're discussing, if he's a part of future films still, I'm not 100% confident or sure in saying yes or no. Here's my thing. I'll say this about Ryan Johnson. What makes me all the more disappointed in I mean, there's a lot for me to discuss about, Last Jedi, but then to see a movie like Knives Out come out, and it's just like, and here again, this is post chapter 16 of the Mandalorian, which we just had this newly
Yeah.
recency bias feeling of like, oh, the
Mm.
satisfaction of finally seeing our character, and
Yeah.
then now J.J. Abrams gives you the best volleyball set to just spike on everyone and give us all the Luke we can handle, and you make
Yeah.
him, again, we can discuss it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
There's a
meat to this bone still.
yeah, yeah, I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that because I think that should be probably the next topic of the next episode because yeah, I mean because the best thing to happen these last couple of days, the best thing on TV, even Mark Hamill tweeted, seen anything good on TV, was
Which I love.
definitely Luke Skywalker at the end of the final episode, and Ryan Johnson did not to give us that at all in The Last Jedi, but we will. I guess we'll discuss that later.
But to be continued. I
Yeah.
do want to make sure, I guess, in closing this episode, great first episode, Mike. Obviously, this thing's
Thanks
coming
for
in.
having me, man. Yeah.
Obviously, if this is the start, I'm very happy. And obviously, as our audience grows, more and more folks being a part of this conversation, as Mike said, the next episode or next week's. Well, I guess with the holiday, Mike, we maybe put a pause on, maybe start after.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll
This is a
discuss.
nice little kickoff. And
Yeah.
and to Mike and to Armando, thank you guys for asking questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, and make sure too, as you can see above, I guess Mike's shoulder there, we are on Anchor. We're also on iTunes and Spotify in case you want to listen after. And then we'll be navigating this thing, obviously, as our audience requests, as we think of, and we try and bring good content. So much Star Wars content to discuss. So be a part of the community, especially if you're in the southern region of the country or any part of the world. We don't care where you're coming from. Rebel Base 10 is open to all and all who may need help in the time of war of the Star Wars. So, again, I am elated to be here. It's been what is it, an hour and 15 minutes, and it's been a good little breeze of a conversation.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
but again, Make sure and connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Rebel Base 10 is available everywhere. YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you can get the notifications for when we go live every week. And we'll be back in full swing to discuss more of everything happening in the galaxy far, far away. Mike, I appreciate it. May the force be with you.
All right, you too, bud. Thank you.
Have a good night, buddy.
See ya.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Come talk to us. Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Come talk to